My name is Kristin Fieldhouse and I've worked in the film industry since 1996, primarily as a cinematographer, but before that I came up through camera. I've always been drawn to visual mediums. I grew up taking stills as a young girl. That was a way to express myself at a time that was difficult in my life. And so the role of the cinematographer involved storytelling of the human condition and emotion that I really wanted to be a part of, and to lend my visual eye and empathy to. I love working with teams, and I could have seen myself being a potter or a painter, but I actually wanted to surround myself with many like-minded individuals to work on something collectively. And so that element of cinematography really drew me in. I knew that I had talents in problem solving, working quickly on my feet, and I really enjoyed the collaborative element of bringing people together and getting the best out of them. I had a completely different career before. I worked as a humanitarian aid worker for many years in Africa and Asia, and I was missing the creative side to that job. An old friend of mine was shooting his first feature and he said, "Kristin, I think you would be great in the film industry." And so I shadowed him as a director. Then I joined the camera trainee program, and I also did the Sheridan College. And then I worked as my way up, and I was a second no loader for about 5 years. But at the same time, I always knew I wanted to be a DP. So I shot on my weekends, didn't get much sleep for a while. And I had very supportive friends. And so I developed and created a reel at that time, and then decided to apply to the American Film Institute in Los Angeles, where I was fortunate to get in and did my master's in cinematography there. I shot about 5 independent features, and I also got an agent at that time, Dora Sessler at Sessler, and she helped me move into television, primarily in Canada, and that's where I've been working predominantly since then. There's 3 important elements that make up the work of a cinematographer, that being the creative process, which is conveying narrative, story arc, character arc in a visual language that conveys nuance and subtext. Then there is the technical side, which is what tools and resources should one use or are available for the specific project, how to use them and when not to use them. And then the last part would be managerial, which involves team building, getting the most out of people, managing the expectations of production with those of the director, which is a very diplomatic position to be in, but equally as important as the other 2. And my struggles have changed as I've grown in my job. So the struggles I had when I first started were access to work, training, and mentorship. But now that I've found my path and I work consistently, I'm very fortunate to work on many different types of projects. My struggles have changed. And so now I'm looking at a more balanced life being, I suppose. So I look at my stress levels, what can I do to reduce them? Prior, I put too much emphasis on my work and it took over, and one can lose a bit of a sense of yourself through that. I was brought up by a very driven mother who said go out there and get, go for it. But I also had inferiority complex perhaps a little bit, and I also struggled with confidence and whether I had what it took to do the role. And so I just kept working through that. And I've had some really good mentors through the years and some very helpful people. So I've grown in confidence as I've done the job. I've been shooting now for about 10 years and I feel really comfortable with it. Now it's about balancing work and life. Yeah. The role of a cinematographer has traditionally been male, and I think that's been shifting a great deal recently. But access is a huge deal. Access to training, mentorship, support, and community. When I first started, there was resistance to me coming up and shooting. And that has definitely changed the last few years, which is fantastic, but we have a considerable way to go, not just for women, but for minorities and for diversification. But a big part of me believing I could do what I went on to do was because I looked up to some very notable female cinematographers, such as Alan Carras, Reed Morano, Rachel Morrison, Natasha Breyer. And those women really strove, to go and do some really inspirational work, and they achieved that, and they inspired me. And the other big part of it is child rearing. I certainly personally have put off having children till later in life because of the demands of my career, and that's a very real thing that I feel other women also have to navigate. The film industry is not conducive to families, and the costs of childcare and support are high. So it takes two people, which is not always the case. And so I don't think we've quite figured that out or how to get around that at this current time. The advice that has been given to me in the past that was very beneficial was to keep shooting and practicing as much as you can, and to get your hands on the role and work as a cinematographer. And by doing that, you learn each and every day so much more than watching others. And I certainly hung back a little bit in camera because I wanted to figure it all out before I became a DP, And really it's the practice of the art and craft of cinematography that really informs you as you move ahead in your career. The second thing I would be make a 5 to 10 year plan, where you want to go, what are your interests, what type of work are you looking to do, and where do you see yourself going? And then, back step it and look at the steps you need to do in order to get there. I certainly got that good advice from somebody, and I've taken it and it's served me well. Third thing, look at your financials. Make sure that you can support yourself, and if not, look to how you might be able to do that. It's a long haul, and in the beginning there's certainly times where you're going to be doing lower budget work that doesn't always match up with the financial responsibilities that you have. It's important to take time out for other parts of your life because it can become all-consuming. So having other interests and building a community around you that supports you really helps you sort of work through all the ups and downs that the industry is going to bring inherently, because it does. I'm quite a calm person under stress, and I'm a very good multitasker. So I like the challenge of balancing the creative with the practical, and I like to see myself as a true collaborator. I think the most important thing for me is my relationship with my director and the producer, and how I can bring everyone together to reach our goals. I'm a very empathetic person, and I love to bring my understanding of the human condition to a visual medium, and I feel I contribute that to the story. And then also I love managing people. I like bringing people together and getting the best out of them, and I think that makes for good storytelling, image making, and a conducive environment on set. I think the biggest aha I've ever had would be that there's no right way of doing something. We're taught often exposure is this, and lensing should be this, and we should follow this rule and that regulation. And I found it very freeing when I learned the rules, but then started playing with them and breaking them. And I felt more expansive in that understanding, because there's so many ways you can tell a story. and sometimes underexposure is actually used as a tool to convey a feeling. This concept of right and wrong, I feel led me astray sometimes, doing things in the correct way, and now I'm much more exploratory in my work. I'm interested in a little bit breaking down those rules and just thinking outside of the box. I've really come to embrace my intuitive nature more than I did in the past, and that's quite liberating. I just finished a feature in February with a very creative director, Wendy Morgan, and we shot on these beautiful old Baltar lenses, and the star was Kelly McCormick, and we didn't have much budget or time, but it was a very creative and collaborative relationship because of the limitations that we had and this incredible team around us, some very strong, wonderful women and men. And so I really enjoyed working with the limitations that we had, but also I had great creative freedom that I didn't necessarily have in television to just go and really go for it with this film. The director, Wendy, and myself spent a lot of time in pre-production, storyboarding by hand this film. And we, interestingly enough, kept quite closely to what we envisaged. I think at the same time we had freedom to play and change things on the day because we had so many locations and challenges as well. But it was enjoyable for me to really be involved in the pre-production so intimately with a director who trusts me and who I've worked with before. So it was a real highlight for me. The second highlight, I suppose, would be the recent HBO show I did with Phoebe Waller-Bridge and Vicky Jones, who did Fleabag and Killing Eve. And that was a completely different kind of series. It was a big show, HBO, a lot of budget. So I was very challenged technically and logistically with night forests and jumping off trains and stunts and, you know, big toys. So the two were very different, but I did them quite close together. So it was a good year, yeah. The biggest change we've seen in the industry is having to shoot more pages with less time while still delivering on quality and the expectations of production. But at the same time, our technology has advanced with camera sensitivity and LED lighting and other tools that open things up to shooting faster. But at the same time, we need to still bring our same sensibilities to the visuals and probably work in a similar way. It's a new language with digital, and you have to understand other elements to it, especially the pipeline, because now you have so many parts where the digital image can be interfered with. And one, as a cinematographer, has to be aware of them and how they can influence the final output, especially when you go into multiple formats. So there are definitely more stakeholders involved than the film process had or is still having, and presents new challenges to your work for sure. It's hard to have full control on the image that we used to have. And perhaps now, where everyone can see a monitor, the trust of the cinematographer has gone down. There are a lot of people that have opinions on that image, you know, in a minute-by-minute basis. I would love to see changes around health and welfare significantly towards the hours that we work. It really concerns me that we are asking people to work very long hours and drive home. And we've seen some deaths in the industry that we could have very much avoided. The impact that the hours that we shoot are quite vast, from people's relationships to family conditions, to sleep deprivation, and to turnaround, coming back on Monday and being refreshed. And so that area concerns me, and I think we could do a lot more work to improve conditions for the people that work in the film industry. Environmentally, I think we waste a lot of resources and we could do better there. Green initiatives, cutting down on materials that we use and the waste that we produce could be significantly reduced. Then in terms of diversity, we've got a lot of work to do in opening up the industry to more diverse voices that can bring understanding and appreciation culturally to the screen. I would love to keep telling stories about the human condition and that are powerful narratively to me and that are meaningful and bring change and awareness to a wider audience. Films that are personal and that I can become visually inspired by to put that on the screen. And I'd also like to play with maybe some bigger productions of it. I've never done a really exciting thriller. I've never done an action film. So there are, genres that I would like to play with that I just haven't done so far. But I think I love where I am right now, and I'd still like to stay and do episodic television because there's so many parts to that I enjoy. When we see ourselves reflected in the content that we watch, it gives us power and it gives us representation, and that's the medium that we live in. So I would love to see more initiatives and support for opening up diversity, for sure. So don't let anybody hold you back and tell you that you can't achieve the job or do the job, because it's there for anyone who is interested in it. And it shouldn't be an exclusive position, in my opinion, because we all have a voice to tell stories and a perspective where we come from. And by diversifying those perspectives, it informs us culturally, and it's very significant to have more voices on the screen. So don't let your voice be marginalized in any way, because you have a right to be there.